and welcome to Wide Angle this week. Shashi Tharoor's latest book, Why I Am a Hindu, is flying off the bookshelves. People want to know what exactly he means by that, especially in this political climate where the conversations around Hindutva, around what Hinduism really means, are entering the political landscape, the media landscape, social conversations everywhere. Shashi Tharoor, thanks very much for being on Wide Angle. My first question for you, the book is clearly quite popular. Riding on the back of your popularity, one assumes, but also you are making an effort to engage much more with religion, with Hindi. You're tweeting in Hindi, you're speaking in Hindi. This is a new Shashi Tharoor we're all seeing. What's going on?
Yeah, well, I mean, the Hindi stuff is an acknowledgement that a lot of our national discourse now is taking place principally in Hindi, and people like myself and other leaders from the South who have tended to work nationally in English find ourselves at a small disadvantage in reaching the sort of Hindi heartland, as it were, of the North, which in terms of national agenda setting is necessary. You know, if you want a particular point of view to reach people, then you have to reach them in the language they find easiest to reach. And that's why, and I do, frankly, barely 10% of my tweets in Hindi, maybe 5 or 6%.
But they've been noticed.
So, yeah, I'm glad. I want them to be noticed. But at the same time, you know, it is pointed out, not unreasonably, that my votes are in one constituency in which Hindi is not actually understood. I'd be better off in Malayalam. So it's a curious kind of paradox we have. You want to get a message across that applies to the whole nation, but to be politically a player, you need to get elected in one place. And there, for example, it may be a totally different language. In my case, Hindi, say in Pranab Mukherjee's case, when he was in active politics, Bengali. Didn't matter that Pranab Mukherjee didn't speak Hindi because he appealed to his voters in Bengali, and so it goes. Now, same with Mr. Chidambaram in Tamil, and so on. That's the paradox. But on the question of religion, because that's really the key thing with this book, there I really felt a need to take this issue head on, because I've actually expressed some of these concerns in relatively minor ways in some of my earlier writings. 30 years ago almost, in the Great Indian Novel, there's this whole sort of almost obsession with dharma, which is a running theme through the book and the conclusion of it. Then in my book, Riot, which described the Ramshila Pujan agitation, the violence in the lead up to what became the demolition of the Babri Masjid, I actually did discuss the rise of the Hindutva movement, and I had a character in the novel who spoke for that point of view. And in India from Midnight to the Millennium, which is 20 years ago now, I actually wrote in a few pages what I've tried to do with the length of a book here, that is my own experience of growing up Hindu in this country, in a sort of liberal Hindu household, and how, therefore, I was ashamed of what had happened just 5 years previously, or even when I wrote the book 4 years previously, in the Babri Masjid. Now that whole thing suggests, I hope, to readers that this is not political opportunism for the elections of 2019. These are issues I've been caring about, concerned about, and have touched on for 20, 30 years. Now, why a full book? Because, of course, the present circumstances of who's ruling us and the way in which they brought the Hindutva message in our face, they've called people like me, quote unquote, anti-Hindu, as if I could be anti my own father and my own self for that matter. And they've also suggested that theirs is the definition of Hinduism that speaks for all Hindus. I believe they're wrong, and I believe it's time to say so.
You said that it's not about political opportunism, and you've mentioned and you've gone into these sort of dispositions in the past in your various writings. However, the timing of this book, admittedly by you as well, is at a time in Indian political discourse where this conversation is front and center. And the Congress has found itself on the back foot. You just preface this answer by talking about how there is a recognition in the Congress party that the Hindi heartland needs to be addressed in its own language. So taken together, while you may say it's not political opportunism, it certainly comes across as a strategy to attract attention before 2019.
Well, shouldn't we? I mean, we are in the business as a political party of helping set the agenda for the nation, and of course eventually of winning votes. So we have a message we want to give. We think our message is better than the message of those in power now, and we will want to spread that message as widely as we can. So I don't see anything to be apologetic about. That's what political parties should be doing.
But
in fact, if anything, I would argue that political parties are not doing enough in terms of ideas. We need to get some ideas out there for people to think about.
so when you say that it's perfectly valid to do this as an election strategy as well, is the Congress party also, which is it's being accused of, as you know, of forgetting minorities, and you're having this conversation about Hinduism and liberal Hinduism and reclaiming that space for discourse, in a sense, by avoiding conversations on the others. I mean, Sonia Gandhi at the India Today conclave made that comment that people have been brainwashed into believing that the Congress is a pro-Muslim party. Why does one have to cancel out the other? Why speak in this language?
It doesn't. I think when she said that people have got this perception, they've been made to think this way, what she meant is it's wrong, it's not fair. But at the same time, I don't avoid speaking about the Muslims, neither in my constituency nor in my writings. This book comes up front and center with both the challenge posed to Hinduism by the advent of Islam 1,000 years ago, and the challenge posed to India as a liberal pluralist society by the present rise of Hindutva and its contempt, to put it bluntly, for minorities. So I have been quite upfront, and in fact you'll find a lot in the book when we get to the contemporary part of the first 138 pages are all about Hinduism per se, and there's very little reference to Islam except in historical context. But in discussing contemporary issues, I talk about all the issues affecting our Muslim brothers and sisters in dealing with this sense of rejection they've been made to feel from the Hindutva brigade.
But Shashi Tharoor, what kind of a comment is it on where we are as a nation today when you take the example of a rape and murder of a child in Jammu and you see a religious polarization take place along that? It's about sexual violence, it's about gender violence, but in this climate it's about communalism, it's about hate, and it's something which now is being picked up across the world as a state where, you know, a state of commentary on India. Now, where does the Congress party fit in on this? I mean, Rahul Gandhi's gone and had a candlelight vigil, and, you know,
we've condemned it unequivocally.
Exactly.
And
but beyond that, I mean, how do you get away from politicizing a really violent crime and yet making it an issue for politicians to be more conscious of?
No, because you see, the whole issue became an issue because the perpetrators' supporters politicized it. In other words, a tragic case, a girl having been brutalized, raped, murdered in this horrible way, was investigated by the police and they went to file a case. It's when people with a communal mindset tried to object to the filing of the case, and that was then followed by a political procession in defense of the perpetrators, with two BJP MLAs participating and so on, ministers participating. That is when the political coloration came in. The crime could have been dealt with as a crime. It became communal because, unfortunately, people defending those who did the crime made it communal, made it political.
And yet this week in London, Prime Minister Modi, in a meeting with the Indian diaspora over there, has said that, you know, this should not be politicized. We're assuming he's responding to Dr. Manmohan Singh's comments about how he should speak much more. Maybe it was something he said on his own, but he's made this comment twice in the last week. That
See, I think what the Prime Minister needs to realize, Maya, is you cannot blame the BJP for every rape in the country. That is wrong. I mean, obviously violence, rape, crimes occur, they are individually done. But you can blame the BJP first for having unleashed the climate of bigotry and intolerance and hatred that has enabled some of these crimes. I don't say all of them, but some. And you can certainly blame the BJP and its leaders and members for in any way defending on communal grounds the perpetrators of such crimes. That you can blame them for. The fact that a tragic rape occurs or murder occurs, whatever, is not a political act. The choosing to defend it is very much a political act, and the BJP can be held accountable for it and should be.
And when you say BJP, do you mean the Prime Minister of India as well, or do you mean
No,
just the party?
It was a local decision, I understand, at the state level of the party. The two ministers who were then asked to step down when the outcry occurred claimed they had gone on instructions from the party leadership in the state. Now, if the central leadership was unaware of it, it should be very easy for them to denounce it and say a horrible miscarriage of political judgment has occurred. They should never have been instructed to go. We should never have defended this. And as far as we are concerned, it's wrong, etc. That could have been said. But for the PM to say nothing for 4 days after the whole public, the whole nation is aware of it, that's what I think, in all fairness, we can point fingers at him for. He should have spoken at the very beginning. You know, these school shootings happen. President Obama is on TV the same day. Now it's President Trump, and he's perhaps not the best example to offer. But even he doesn't wait 4 days before reacting to a tragedy in his country that is dominating public discourse.
So, in defense of Prime Minister Modi, you will have many people say that the Prime Minister cannot be held accountable for every crime that takes place in the country.
I said that.
Right. And he cannot be held accountable also for the behavior of his party men.
Yes, he can be. He is the political head of the party and bears moral responsibility for things done in its name. I'm afraid if I, as a congressman, said something or did something stupid, inevitably they would pin it on my party saying, look what your congressman said. It's normal. That's politics, but it's also real. In a political party establishment, there is a sense of collective responsibility. So I don't blame the Prime Minister for the crime. I blame the Prime Minister's party for defending the perpetrators of the crime, and I blame the Prime Minister for not repudiating them instantly and denouncing the crime until 4 days of mounting outrage have occurred. And you know, it's only, after all, tragically, there are rapes happening every day in our country.
Right.
No one's blaming the Prime Minister for all of them. This one became a political issue because his political party chose to make it one.
So, we're seeing editorials in the New York Times. We saw protests on the streets of London that were trying to attract the Prime Minister's attention. Whatever comments he's made outside India. He made them in London yesterday. But the audience seems to be very clearly back home.
Yeah.
So he's using...
He's done that throughout his foreign travels for the last 4 years. He speaks abroad, often in Hindi, in order to reach voters here. That's part of their technique.
But
when Mr. Jaitley goes in a suit and speaks in English on finance issues, we never get much attention or coverage here. When Mr. Modi goes, he speaks about issues that are hot button political vote winners in this country, and he does so in Hindi, and he does so in front of TV cameras.
So how
we've got used to that.
So what does this say for, you know? One of the things he also said was, now everyone is talking about India. The Indian passport is something people should be proud of. These are comments you've heard from the Prime Minister regularly and as recently as yesterday. But something like this, when there are these worldwide comments and protests taking place, we live in a world that is now no longer defined by geographical boundaries. Social media allows comments and commentary to take place transnationally. Right. So how do you try and combat this message? Now, there is a message, there is an impression that's going out to the world. India is not safe for its women. We saw this in 2012 as well.
Correct. I mean, the fact is that I utterly reject the idea that people had to be ashamed of an Indian passport before Mr. Modi came to power. On the contrary, many would argue the opposite, that it's some of the forces that have been unleashed since Mr. Modi came to power that make people ashamed of saying they're from India or that they're Indian, whereas there was always a great sense of pride associated with being Indian. I'm one of those who lived abroad for over 3 decades and proudly held on to my Indian passport the whole time. This is what many of us felt, a certain sense of liberation that India brought to the world in 1947 and built. I mean, our founding fathers were great human beings. The Gandhis, the Nehrus, the Ambedkars, the Patels, the Maulana Azads, that entire cohort. They gave passports to their dreams and they gave it to us. We are honoured beneficiary of that legacy. It's shocking for the Prime Minister of India to say that you only feel pride in your passport today. I'm sorry, I felt much more pride in the original passport that I've always held with pride and commitment. So that kind of talk is a shame. But you're right, you know, wherever you say it, it reaches everywhere. For that matter, a silly comment made by the Chief Minister of Tripura was leading on the BBC about how India invented the internet 2,000 years ago.
Right.
I mean, one of the most absurd things you can hear, but it's typical. It's of a piece with the way in which a lot of these BJP leaders have been speaking. Now, in these circumstances, Maya, what we have to wake up and say is, look, since what you say has echoes around the world, whether you say it in Tripura or you say it in London, say it with responsibility.
Since that's something that you've been doing as well in terms of where the Congress party stands, and now you're talking about taking on a strategy as a party, as a whole, where you're challenging these ideas or these statements or these positions that the BJP and the ruling party is coming up with, time, whether it's about the internet 2,000 years ago, whether it is about Hindutva, whether it is about being united on the issues of gender violence, things like that. But Shashi Tharoor, what is your role going to be in 2019 for the elections?
I mean, I certainly hope the party will re-nominate me for my seat. I've worked hard there and I'll be a candidate. If they'd like me to campaign elsewhere, as they did last time, I will again go and do my bit in other constituencies in other states after my own states' votes have been cast. I mean, that's ultimately the way in which
many people say that, you might be Rahul Gandhi's Manmohan Singh.
Oh, I don't think Rahul Gandhi needs a Manmohan Singh in that sense. Sonia ji felt way back in 2004 that for various reasons to do with the massive issue that was made of her Italian descent, you saw Sushma Swaraj threatening to shave her head and sit in dharna on parliament steps and all the stuff, that she felt, why let this be an issue? We'll have somebody else whom the nation and the party respects. Rahul Gandhi has no such problem. I think that if the Congress party wins an election, we fully expect him to lead the country as well as the party.
And so going from there, I mean, when you look at Karnataka today and the campaign over there, what are your expectations of Karnataka? What are the challenges there? Are you keeping up to speed with that election campaign?
Yeah, I am. I'll be campaigning in Karnataka. I've been asked to campaign. And the fact is that Karnataka is an important election for us because, very frankly, the momentum is with us right now. The amazing performance in Gujarat, where Mr. Modi had to squeak through by the skin of his teeth, his party had to. The victories in the two by-elections in Rajasthan, 3, I beg your pardon, and the two by-elections in UP, the momentum is very much with us. And people see that. I mean, even the government they formed in Meghalaya, they formed with 2 seats. So you can hardly take that as a particularly serious triumph. So Karnataka, if we win there, gives us an irresistible headwind going, I mean, not a headwind, a tailwind going all the way into the 3 elections at the end of the year, 4, Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh and Mizoram at the end of the year, which is the precursor, as you know, to the general elections. Unless Mr. Modi decides to advance the general elections to coincide with those. But we don't know. Whichever way, there's nothing between now and then, no other electoral test. And therefore, the momentum will be with us. And that's why it's very important.
We've also seen the Congress sort of be the single largest party like they were in Goa and not from the government. I mean,
so that's what we have to be alert about. The fact is that I know the last poll seemed to imply that though we would, as of that poll, and it's only one poll, they were saying that though the Congress would be very clearly the largest single party, that the numbers of the other 2 parties, BJP and JDS, together would be enough to form the government. So we need to change that. We need to push ourselves over over that tipping point where it becomes impossible for others. In Karnataka, I think that's 113 seats we would need, and quite realistically, that means that just judging by some of these polls, we need a little extra boost between now and polling day to push us over that top.
And with the way caste equations are also playing out in the Karnataka campaign, I mean, is that something the Congress is wary of falling into?
Look, every political party has to be conscious of caste. It's not something I say with any pride. I am, in that sense, an old-fashioned Nehruvian. Nehruji believed that caste would disappear, that people would outgrow these old ideas, and he turned out to be wrong because the political parties actually found caste to be a very effective instrument of political mobilization. That many people, when they went to cast their vote, they voted their caste. That was the way it happened. And so candidates were identified with an eye to the caste composition of the electorate. All of these things happened. And unfortunately, it's become an inescapable reality for every party. It's not just the Congress. I think Theresa May was rather baffled to have Narendra Modi saying, "I'm so pleased to meet you on the birth anniversary of our Lord Basaveshwarappa," which of course, obviously she was thrown because it wasn't in her talking points, I'm sure. And many in India were thrown. I'm sure many in North India didn't have no clue what he was talking about. But it was clearly a message that was going back to Karnataka, that even in London, I'm thinking of you, to the Lingayat community of Karnataka. So don't tell me the BJP isn't playing to the caste gallery. They just are.
All right, Shashi Tharoor, thanks very much. I know we're running out of time, but thanks very much for speaking to us. And we hope to have you back on the show as the election campaign hots up further as well. But it was great to have you. Thank you.
Good to see you. Thanks, Maya.